Hello there. Welcome into a Friday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300. I don't know what I was trying to say there. The Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program. And I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. You can also tweet at me at Gingerly Tweets. As I'm listening to Josh Kroenke after the announcement that David Adelman is going to be the full-time head coach of the Denver Nuggets, a theme kept emerging that I've been thinking about, and it's really been there since the firing of Michael Malone and Calvin Booth. This is about Josh Kroenke taking back control of the team, taking back control of his house, getting his house back in order. The Nuggets, for so many years, have been kind of the baby of the Kroenke empire, right? So much so that there was a long-time running joke that the Nuggets were the favorite over the Avalanche, and the Avalanche were kind of left to fend for themselves. But Josh Kroenke's always taken more interest in the Denver Nuggets because of his, basketball background. And then as more interests come up, they buy the Rams, they build a new stadium, they buy Arsenal. Josh Kroenke spent a lot of his time in London with Arsenal. The interest is divested across all of their properties, to where I think he would be the first to admit this. He kind of dropped the ball a little bit when he kind of just rubber stamped Calvin Booth as the next general manager of the Denver Nuggets. Now, it hasn't always been a bad thing. It hasn't always been to the detriment of the Denver Nuggets, because it was actually a really good thing once Tim Connolly proved himself capable of doing the job. When Joe Sakic did the same thing with the Avalanche, the best thing an owner can do in that situation is just step out of the way and write a check. Connolly and Sakic were handling it. Seems like those who have followed those two, maybe not as much. And Josh Kroenke on it repeatedly, and you're going to hear him say it again, laments how he took his hands off the wheel after they won a title. And even before that, when Calvin Booth was named the general manager. And I think part of it is because the power dynamic within that organization changed when Tim Connolly left for the Minnesota job. Because before that, it was Tim Connolly, Michael Malone, neither of which had the resume to really say, I'm calling the shots here. They both were kind of in some ways on an equal plane, and they both reported to Josh Kroenke. Well, when Tim Connolly left and a junior member of his staff and Calvin Booth took over, I think Michael Malone felt, right or wrong, that he was kind of the head of the organization at that point. That he was the deciding vote here. And where he cast his deciding vote time and time again was when it came to that balance between winning basketball games and developing the young players. I think Michael Malone felt like, I'm the longest tenured employee here. Josh is in here. Almost a power vacuum formed within the Denver Nuggets organization, and Michael Malone felt that it was his job to fill that. And I think that that's kind of what Josh Kroenke is referring to when he talked about regretting not being more present when the general manager role was shifted from Tim Connolly to Calvin Booth.
I think I need to be very hands-on in periods of transition. And then you have to, I'm not saying let go of the rope, but you have to allow people to do their jobs. And so if I'm critiquing myself kind of as I was recently, I needed to be much more hands-on in periods of transition, especially a couple of years ago.
The firing of both Booth and Malone and both Booth and Malone was about starting to take back control of the organization. So are these hires, first Adelman and then the new GM, whoever that might be, getting back to the way it was where they each have their responsibilities, but ultimately Josh Kroenke is above them and they are to keep open lines of communication. And he is the one that will break the tie if there is one. I'm inclined to believe that it's going to be an internal hire, but what I am laying out does not necessarily mean it will be an internal hire. But I go back to Josh Kroenke's up-and-coming remarks, right? Bringing in somebody with a little less ego that's not going to want as much power. Somebody like David Adelman apparently proved to be somebody that will listen and somebody that will go along with the bigger vision here of where the Denver Nuggets need to go. And speaking of, here's another thing Josh Kroenke said yesterday that really caught my ear.
I think I can help come in and provide a larger organizational, vision of where we are, and what I refer to as the 1, the 3, and the 5 is, what are our goals for the next 12 months? What are our goals for the next 3 years? And then how does that fit in a 5-year window to win the whole thing? The Nuggets 1, 3, and the 5 has been thrown out the window for quite some time because we've been in a 1 year, we're going for it.
And therein lies the direction of the Denver Nuggets. In many ways, even though the roster I would expect to remain largely identical to what it was this year, it's almost like a reset. It's certainly a reset of the power dynamic, the power structure within the organization, but also a reset of expectation and of direction. Now, we could debate whether thinking about 5 years down the road at the same time as thinking about this year is productive. And I think that was part of the issue is they were trying to do both the last 2 seasons. But I think that's the direction they're going in, that there is going to be more of a mindset towards the next 3 to 5 years as much as there is about this upcoming season. And how does that manifest itself? The young players. That's where it is. That's where all of this is. Josh Kroenke believed in Calvin Booth's vision compared to the San Antonio Spurs of we have an aging core, we'll draft and develop these guys, and eventually they will take over. He believes in that. David Adelman is going to have to play Peyton Watson, Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, and Deron Holmes quite a bit. And he's just going, whether, the first goal is to win games, obviously, but you're not going to hear this team talk about getting a top seed. You may not even hear about this team talking about home court. They're just going to get in. They know with their core, as flawed as it is, they're going to get in the playoffs, and they're not going to be in the play-in. If everything is copacetic and everything is kumbaya, they're not going to end up in the play-in. They'll probably be a 4th or 5th seed. So without the risk of the bottom falling out, it's And it should have been easier on Michael Malone in this regard, but it clearly wasn't. But it will be easier on David Adelman to balance the two, knowing, well, we're not going to fall out of the playoffs. Not asking these guys to play 30 minutes a night, but he's going to play them. And then where the just this year vision comes into play a little bit is they try, if they can get some combination of Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric to opt out, and I don't know that they can get them to. If they do, then they will try to use that money and that flexibility to bring in a veteran or two to supplement it. Because if Russell Westbrook comes back, if he opts into his deal, that's a wrap for Jalen Pickett. Like, he's just done. He's never going to realize whatever potential he may have if Russell Westbrook's still on this roster. Dario Saric's inclusion in the roster does not necessarily have that impact, as you saw this year. He's not in the way of anybody playing except Dario Saric. But whatever flexibility they may gain, not with trading any members of the core, but by DeAndre Jordan leaving via free agency and in some combination of Russ and Dario Saric opting out, they will use that to sign a veteran, whether it's Bruce Brown or Brooke Lopez or whoever it might be. But they will really push the younger guys, and you will see them play more than you ever have. Because the 1, the 3, and the 5 is now part of the Nuggets' thinking. So I don't think there are going to be any major changes to this roster. But the behind-the-scenes stuff, the thinking of this organization is what's being reset here. And then if this season goes the same way this one did, and it's another second-round exit, then even though Jamal Murray will probably have less value this time next year than he does right now, Porter maybe a little bit more value if he's healthier, but then they'll deal with that. That's also when they get a first-round pick. They don't have a draft pick this year. They have a first-round pick next year. They'll start to I think they're leaving the option of what to do with the core open until this time next year. And then we may see some moves. I disagree with it. I think the time is now to make these changes. But it just became abundantly clear yesterday listening to Josh Kroenke that he and I don't feel the same way. But this is Josh Kroenke taking the power back. He is in charge. So direct any complaints or compliments accordingly. Anything they do or don't do this offseason, Josh Kroenke has his fingerprints on it. Josh Kroenke has the say on it. This is going back to when Tim Connolly was hired and when Brian Shaw was hired and then Michael Malone was hired. That time in Nuggets history, that's what this is going to look like. Josh Kroenke will be omnipresent. You will see him a lot. And anything they do this offseason will have his stamp of approval. Take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Josh Kroenke's old head coach has a mea culpa of his own last night. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports on this Friday. Hopefully you're already well on your way to the holiday weekend. For those who may not know, there is an event going on this weekend that may be of interest. It's Territory Days in Old Colorado City. It's a free street fair that you can go to, all sorts of vendors, great food. I drank a pineapple smoothie out of an actual pineapple last year. Like some of the interesting confections that you get at like the state fair make their way to something like Territory Days. There's rides, there's going to be a concert, all sorts of stuff. And there will be Ryan. Please don't let that deter you from coming. I'm only going to be there Monday afternoon. But if you listen to any of our other radio stations in the building, whether it be KKFM, KVOR, Magic FM, the crew from those stations will be out at various points throughout the weekend as well. I think we're hanging out with our friends at KKTV. But I'll be there, I think, 1 to 7 on Monday. I think where I will be. So regardless of whether you come out on Monday or tomorrow or Sunday, make a point to do it. I think it's I think like citizenship is riding on it. Like you can't live in Colorado Springs without going to Territory Days at least once. I don't know. I can't verify that, but yeah, Old Colorado City tomorrow, Sunday, Monday. If you're looking for something to do for the holiday weekend. You know that Dark Knight line? Of course you do. Not the one about you think the dark is your ally. The other one. The one from the Joker movie. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. It feels applicable right now to Michael Malone. The end of his coaching career, you can judge which one he ended up. Some people think that in a sports sense that he died a hero. He was fired. Should we change that? Let me change it a little bit. You either fired a hero or you appear on TV and become a villain. That's really what's going on with Michael Malone. The other night saying that the second half performance of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was why he's the MVP. When we have plenty of audio evidence to show that Michael Malone believed very much that Jokic was the MVP until, coincidentally, Michael Malone got fired. And now the sudden change of heart, perhaps. But Michael Malone last night, and this is what Harvey Dent didn't speak to on The Dark Knight. If you live long enough to become the villain, is there something you can do to go back the other way? Michael Malone at least tried it last night.
Nikola won the first of his 3 MVPs, and I did vote for him again this year if I had a vote. Want to make sure the people in Denver know that because right now I'm getting a lot of heat back home.
So it is possible that in that Sports Center hit that he did, where he said, this is why Shai is the MVP, perhaps he just left out some words. He is new to the job. Perhaps he left out very important words like, that's why he's up for the MVP, or why some people voted him to be the MVP. But for it to be a declarative statement, it didn't hit the ears of Nuggets Nation collectively well. So I think I will use my given duty to speak for Nuggets Nation and say, you know what, Michael Malone? We forgive you. Okay, you went on there. You clarified. You said Jokic was your guy if you had a vote. Okay, but we're not done yet. We're not done yet. That's not enough. Like, I should say we're going to forgive you. But there's one other aspect to this MVP debate that you need to weigh in on. And that is not only do you have to clarify that Nikola Jokic is indeed your MVP, you also have to take a shot at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. Michael Malone obliged later that night on SportsCenter.
A lot of times, offensive players like Shai will initiate the contact, will hook his arm, looking to draw that contact. He is a foul artist, as I mentioned earlier today.
Merchant was the word we're looking for. Merchant. Not foul artist. That is complimentary in nature. We want merchant. But you know what? You're still getting at the same point. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander dupes referees into making terrible foul calls. That's it. That's what Michael Malone is saying. So that's his penance. He did it, and we can all collectively move on with our lives. But I was thinking about this last night. I'm actually kind of disappointed that my initial reaction wasn't proven to be true, or the initial reaction of many people didn't prove to be true. I'm actually disappointed that Michael Malone is not taking shots, that he's not making a heel turn. I would kind of like him to turn against Nikola Jokic. Add to the theater of it all. Lord knows we need it in this series because this series is a wrap. Turn against Nikola Jokic. Give us something else to talk about. George Karl did this. George Karl took every opportunity after he was let go to then trash Carmelo Anthony and say why he couldn't win a title with Carmelo Anthony. Like, I kind of want Michael Malone to do that with Jokic. Now, they did win a title, but for the last 2 years, say he was out of shape, say he doesn't play any defense, point out his Game 7 record the last couple of years. I am legitimately disappointed that Michael Malone is not being more petty. It would make for better television and better radio. But hopefully you accept what Michael Malone did last night and understand that being a newbie in the television space, perhaps his words that first night were not chosen as carefully as he would like them to. Now, as I said, as far as the game last night in this series, that's about it, right? We're about done here. Anthony Edwards had the bounce back game that he needed to have. 32 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, and they were still no match for Oklahoma City. 118-103, and it wasn't even that close. I'll put a percentage on it. I am 92.6% sure that Oklahoma City is going to the NBA Finals. Why 92.6% sure? Because that's how often a team that goes up 2-0 in a series ends up winning a best of 7. 92.6% of the time. They have a record of 431-34. They have won 400 more series than they have lost, going up 2-0. So all this nonsense about a series doesn't start until a team loses on their home floor, it's nonsense. 93% of the time, a series doesn't even have to get to the second city in order to be decided. And that's where we're at. Minnesota's not beating Oklahoma City in 4 of their next 5 games. They're not. This series is over. If the Wolves can get a game like that from Anthony Edwards and still come up so short as they did last night, they're not winning 4 of the next 5. And now there's another dynamic that has emerged over the last 2 games. The fouls, the officiating, it's in the Wolves' head. And if you recall, that was Aaron Gordon's biggest regret of the Thunder series. He felt like he was far more preoccupied with the officiating and what fouls were being called and what fouls were not being called than he should have been. And you're seeing that with the Wolves. Game 1, Anthony Edwards throwing the ball at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Last night, Jaden McDaniels, after shoving Shai to the floor last night, was asked about it and said, I wanted to foul him for real. That aspect of the Oklahoma City Thunder is ingrained in the Wolves' head. And already the math isn't in their favor. The talent, the team itself, they are at a disadvantage. And now this mental edge has creeped in to the Wolves. And I just don't see how they're making their way out of this, because they're not. Oklahoma City is going to go to the finals. That was the only thing Minnesota had left, is not to get wrapped up in the foul baiting from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and that clearly is. They've lost that. And I saw something where Shai said, when we were a 10 seed, nobody cared. Or I don't know what seed he said, but he was saying before this year, no one cared about the number of free throws he took. And it's like, yeah, and I mean, I would actually push back against that notion, and say that probably people cared a lot. There were just fewer of them. Like, does Shai not understand that now he's on the biggest stage that league has to offer, or close to the biggest stage, but he's been on the biggest stage that he's been so far? More attention is on the Thunder now than it ever has been since he's been there. You don't think that's going to lead? It's not that nobody cared before. There weren't enough people to talk about it because nobody was watching Oklahoma City. Now everybody is, and everybody's seeing it. Or actually, less people are seeing it than I thought, because the ratings for game 1 were down. Apparently, the Nuggets-Thunder series was enough to turn some people off of the way that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plays the game of basketball. And I get it. He's not a generational, foul merchant. The numbers, he was 3rd in the league this year. So just this year, there were 2 guys that drew more fouls than him. But I've honed in on what it is. It's the way he does it. It's how it looks. That's the problem. It's not the number necessarily. What bothers people is that he's so, he's so floppy, right? He's flying. He gets hit and he's flying to the floor. The head movements that he makes, like, because he's so thin, it looks like it's not when, like, Jokic or Embiid or Giannis try to get foul calls, because what they're doing there's not that added visual element. Like, Nikola Jokic isn't flying across the floor. Giannis isn't flying across the floor. It's how he looks doing it that bothers people more than anything else. You know what it reminds me of, and what this Oklahoma City team reminds me of, and it's not a coincidence considering who their general manager is, Sam Presti. Where did he come from? San Antonio. You know who Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is? He's Manu Ginobili. You remember Manu. Remember how you Nuggets fans treated Manu Ginobili whenever he would visit? You hated that guy for the very same reason you don't like Shai. Manu would foul bait, but he'd do these histrionics that makes it seem like he was shot instead of, a more aesthetically pleasing way of being a foul merchant is head faking someone to get them to go in the air and then jumping into them. Still being a foul merchant, but it doesn't look so terrible. This Oklahoma City team is that Spurs team. Forget about the Nuggets trying to become the Spurs. Oklahoma City is beating them to the punch. They're the Spurs. And Shea is Manu. And I mean, the same rules apply. I remember watching those Spurs teams, especially against the Denver Nuggets. What was the big complaint there? The San Antonio Spurs, a great defensive team, were a little handsy, physical, and then on the other end, Manu Ginobili would flop around like a fish in a boat and get every call. That's what's going on with Oklahoma City. And what bothers me more than anything else is that Oklahoma City is acting all indignant about it. Like they don't understand. Like they're not seeing what we're seeing. You just like it because it's benefiting you as a fan. If it was another team doing this, you would be joining everybody else. So just my suggestion is just shh. Don't get involved. This doesn't concern you. Just keep your head down, stay off social media, and be there at the parade in about a month. Because that's where this thing is heading. And be happy about it. And don't apologize for it. But understand why everybody's upset. And don't try to talk us out of it because you're not going to be successful and you're not going to win the argument. They are incredibly physical on the defensive end of the floor, and on the offensive end, they flop around like a fish, and they get all these calls. And it's not a fun brand of basketball to watch. On the offensive end, on the defensive end, I see the merits of it. It's impressive to watch a team defend as physically and as well as Oklahoma City does. It's the offensive side. You got the MVP. You're going to probably get the Larry O'Brien trophy. Just be happy in that. Don't try to also win the argument because you're not going to. Foul artistry, I should say. That's the phrase of the day. Foul artistry from SGA. Take your thoughts on the Western Conference Finals. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, a player that knows a thing or two about physicality, but knows nothing of flopping because he doesn't do it. Aiden Rocha, midfielder for the Switchbacks. You'll hear from him next. On the topic of the foul artistry of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, as Michael Malone pointed out last night on ESPN, Aaron says the NBA needs an embellishment foul. I agree. We have penalties for that, or fouls or calls. You can be charged with it in soccer and in hockey. And there should be something similar on the books in the NBA. I 100% agree. The problem is that when Shea does those things, he's getting the foul call. So I think the best thing would be for him to be called for some sort of an infraction when he does that. Now, there's a middle ground, and this is where hockey is. Like, you can get cross-checked, but also go above and beyond in that embellishment, what Aaron is talking about. But a lot of the fouls, quote-unquote, that SGA draws are not fouls. So the embellishment rule, while I 100% agree with it, only will help with some of the fouls that he draws. The bigger issue is, and the thing I would just like to see, is the referees not get duped. Especially early in games. That's when that SGA goes to work. Don't fall for it. I'm sorry, but, Draymond has the same thing for his antics, right? Referees go into the game knowing they have to deal with somebody and their antics. Why haven't they gotten to that point with SGA where the first couple, and I'm not saying it tips the series or anything, like Oklahoma City's better than Minnesota. Like, that's just point blank period. And I'm tired of this. Even if you took away all of SGA, yeah, we know it doesn't ultimately change the series, but that's even more of a reason to say, why does he feel compelled to do this all the time? If he can just play the rest of his game and be fantastic. Just don't fall for it. Hopefully the NBA Finals referees will do a little bit better. And this is why I say I don't have a problem with I'm not rooting one way or another in the Eastern Conference. But we cannot have the combination of Jalen Brunson and Shea in the same series. We can't. So I guess we're at the point now that the Thunder are up 2-0. Indiana's got to win their series. It's got to be OKC Indiana. Because I can't deal with Jalen Brunson and Shea doing what they do for 7 games. And Jalen Brunson isn't as bad as Shea is at it. I'll be fair to him in that regard. But I can't have both of them on the court. So I'm sorry, Knick fans. You have to take one for the team. For the greater good, Indiana has to get to the NBA Finals. Shifting to soccer now. The Colorado Springs Switchbacks begin the first leg of a 3-match road swing tomorrow night in Irvine, California, 7 o'clock here on this fine radio station, if you are so inclined. The Switchbacks, they've got a little something going right now. Got the draw in Vegas, came home, got the win this weekend against Pittsburgh. Something might be turning for the defending USL champions. We'll see tomorrow night, I suppose. Big reason why they've gotten results over the last couple matches has been the contributions of midfielder Aiden Rocha. Set up the great goal by Matt Mahoney that ultimately won the game against Pittsburgh. I caught up with Aiden at training and asked him to take me first through that free kick that led to the match-winning goal.
Yeah, we had two of our center backs lined up back post with Garvin and Matt, and my only response
Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Friday. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. If you'd like to weigh in on the day's topics, easy enough. 719-247-1313 is the phone and the text line, so you can do either, or you can tweet me at Gingerly Tweets. So the Western Conference Finals have been kind of a dud. Oklahoma City has proven to be the much better team so far, and I don't expect Minnesota to show a lot moving forward. I think that at this point, OKC in 4 or 5 is a better bet than Minnesota winning this series. And I've seen a lot of this in the last, almost 24 hours, I suppose. This idea that the Nuggets and Thunder actually played in the real Western Conference Final, right? Because they're looking at what happened with the Nuggets and the Thunder and saying the Nuggets were a much better match for OKC than Minnesota is. So clearly this was the Western Conference Final, and whatever is going on right now between Minnesota and OKC, it's something. It's a coronation, I suppose, more than anything else. But this kind of pseudo-transitive property, I don't think really applies here. And I think how quickly people forget, and I don't want to put too much into what has happened the last calendar year between the Nuggets and the Wolves, but I just bring it up to say, don't forget that a lot of what bothers the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves still have. Okay, in this new NBA, where the super team is dead, matchups become more important. Your strengths versus the other team's weaknesses and vice versa. Styles making the fights, all that kind of stuff is more important now than it has been for much of the time we've been following the NBA, because for most of our lives, the NBA has had at least one team that is just so much better than everyone else. Whether it be the Warriors, the Bulls, even going back, Lakers, Celtics, well beyond that, the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, like, it was a sport that had a lot of dynasties and a lot of teams that just 90% of the league just could not deal with. Now the playing field has been leveled out a lot. So the matchups matter more. And we saw this last year. The Minnesota Timberwolves beat the Denver Nuggets and turn around and lose to Dallas. So it's about, what do you bring to the table that could cause us problems? And Minnesota has kind of owned the Nuggets over the last calendar year, because Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker provide length on the perimeter, and the Nuggets just came off of a series where they couldn't hit threes. It would not be easier if they were playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, even though it's Julius Randle in there instead of Cat. You still have Naz Reid. You still have the ability to allow Rudy Gobert to play off the ball, float, make things a little bit more difficult for Nikola Jokic. And Anthony Edwards would still be a big problem for the Denver Nuggets, who are not as good defensively as OKC is. Part of the reason why Anthony Edwards had such a poor game one is because the Thunder are a far superior defensive team than the Denver Nuggets. So if Anthony Edwards were to go up against the Denver Nuggets, he would have an easier time, and has routinely had a pretty easy time with the Denver Nuggets. So I don't buy this idea that OKC and Denver was the real Western Conference final. Because that's implying that the Denver Nuggets would have beaten the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I just flat out don't believe they would have. I don't believe it. This team, lest we forget, was built by Tim Connolly, coached by one of Michael Malone's former assistants, to beat the Denver Nuggets, to have the answer for Nikola Jokic. That has not changed. And just because Minnesota is struggling with OKC does not mean they would have struggled with the Denver Nuggets. Probably would have been a long series. Last year was a long series, right? 7-game series. But I think the Wolves would have won that series. I think this is the rightful Western Conference final. And just because OKC is making mincemeat out of the Wolves does not open up the possibilities that the Nuggets or the Lakers or the Rockets or any other team would have had a better chance against OKC. I think the problem with this matchup is a lot of the things that Minnesota brings to the table, OKC does as well, and they're better. Right? The way they play defensively, they have multiple bigs. That makes life really difficult on Rudy Gobert. I mean, if Nikola Jokic has a problem with Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren at times, certainly Rudy Gobert's going to. So I don't buy into this idea that OKC and Denver was the real Western Conference final. I mean, it was far more entertaining than this. And you wish that Minnesota and OKC could have met earlier and the Nuggets could have been on the easier side of the bracket and avoided, and I talked about this leading up to the playoffs. The ideal scenario for the Denver Nuggets is OKC and Minnesota are on the other side of the bracket. Because I felt all season that even when the Nuggets were not impressive and had their issues, I still thought that there were only two teams in the Western Conference that I knew would beat the Nuggets in a 7-game series, and that was OKC and Minnesota. And then the turmoil of firing the coach and everything led me to believe that perhaps the Clippers could do it. And I was wrong on that. But Minnesota and OKC are bad matchups for the Denver Nuggets. Especially the OKC team. And the Nuggets deserve some credit here. I don't know that anybody's going to mention them when OKC has their parade, but somebody should, because the Denver Nuggets, and they said this going into the series, that the Denver Nuggets would bring out the best in them. And I thought you saw Game 4, the best of OKC come out. They matured. They grew up. And that's part of what's factoring into this series. It's a different OKC team than it was a couple of weeks ago. They're even more formidable because they're not making young mistakes anymore. But the Wolves would have beaten the Denver Nuggets. And I'll say this too, to that point. If you are someone that thinks that the Nuggets need to make significant changes, maybe you're not saying blow the whole thing up, maybe you're not saying Porter and Murray, but you're saying, I guess the litmus test for that would be the core. If you are somebody that thinks that the Denver Nuggets should entertain breaking up in some form or fashion the core four, then you should not be saying that Nuggets Thunder was the real Western Conference final, because that would intimate that the Nuggets are not that far off and would lend credence to Josh Kroenke's thinking, which is, I just need to get David Adelman to be the head coach. I need us to be more in harmony and we'll be good. The fact of the matter is, since the Nuggets have won the title, when they won the title, they were the best team in the West. Last year, they were the second best team in the West behind Minnesota. Now they're the third best team in the West behind OKC and Minnesota. Next year, they might well be fourth behind Houston. San Antonio is not that far behind, especially if they end up getting Giannis. This team, and this has been what I've been saying, like the Nuggets are fading. They're not stagnating. You think because they bowed out at the same point that they're on the same level. They're not, because even if they get through OKC, they still have Minnesota, who I don't think that they would win a 7-game series against. They're getting worse. They're falling behind. Teams are jumping them, and they're going to continue to without the Denver Nuggets making significant moves to reconfigure this team to fit better what is valued in the NBA today. That different financial model that Josh Kroenke keeps going back to, and why he keeps referring to it. And then not in the same breath, but in his same mind, going, I don't need to do anything with Porter, Gordon, Jokic, and Murray. It's like they're running opposed to one another. If you think that your team was built under a different financial model and that way of building the team doesn't work anymore, then you should break up the team that was built under the previous way. The fact of the matter is the Denver Nuggets are not getting closer to a title by running it back. They will get further away. Houston or San Antonio, take your pick. It could be both, are going to pass them because they are young. They are deep. They have, and that's why I put Houston ahead of San Antonio, because San Antonio hasn't had any playoff experience yet. But you see Wemby, they have the rookie of the year in Steph Castle. They acquired De'Aaron Fox. They might get Giannis. Teams are just going to they're going to be on the same treadmill that the Lakers and the Warriors have been for the last few years. I mean, I'll at least give Milwaukee credit that they tried to do something. It didn't work, but they tried. Lakers and Warriors just kind of sat there for a few seasons and just went, well, we're good enough. No, you're not. And then finally they woke up. The Warriors traded for Jimmy Butler. The Lakers, you know that situation. They didn't actually do anything. Luka just arrived swaddled in a basket on their front doorstep. But those teams were going through it. They kept believing we're championship teams. We're a championship team. We just need one or two things to break our way. No, you don't. You're getting worse. More teams are passing you. They have both seen the Nuggets surpass them. In addition to OKC, in addition to Minnesota. Lakers, until they got Luka, you could argue are not even the best team in their city. This is the danger of everything I hear from Josh Kroenke. If they're going to contend for a title next year, realistically, they must do something with their core. They have to do something. And I'm of the belief that anything they can realistically do with Michael Porter is probably not going to be enough either. But they got to do something. And it's not signing another vet on the minimum. Everyone's waiting for Bruce Brown to come back and rescue the Denver Nuggets. It's been 2 years since the guy's been here. Have you been watching him? Like, I'm not saying he's not an upgrade for the bench, but I think there's going to be great disappointment among Nuggets fans when Bruce Brown comes back and he's not quite what he was when they won a title. The Nuggets have to be proactive. You know, Josh Kroenke said this himself a number of years ago. Basically something to the extent of, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. that there's no such thing as standing pat. Right? You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And what his team has done over the last couple of years has been getting worse. And everything I heard from him yesterday says that he is voluntarily, to some degree, allowing his team to get worse more. Or worse still. And I just don't understand. Maybe it will turn out differently. Maybe Josh Kroenke is trying to underpromise and overdeliver. But if you take him at his word and you listen to what he said yesterday, Porter and Murray aren't going anywhere. And that will just leave the Denver Nuggets to get jumped by another young up-and-coming team, in addition to OKC and Minnesota still being better than them. And then maybe the result will actually spur them into doing something. Right? Because pretty soon there won't be enough teams that the Nuggets are better than for them to get out of the first round. And then being worse or finishing worse than you did the year before will finally make it click that the way they are built is not working. It doesn't work anymore. There was a sudden change. It did work. They won a title, but right then and there, the rules changed, and now it doesn't work anymore. And the problem is they are stuck right there. They don't have the advantage of kind of sitting back and watching what happens. They're in the middle of it, and they just seem unwilling to do anything that they might perceive as drastic. I view it as proactive. Because let's spin this forward and say that the Nuggets essentially run it back. And let's say that San Antonio gets Giannis and the Houston Rockets improve. And now the Nuggets are the 5 seed. And they have to go into one of these places and they end up losing. Then they're like, okay, now we got to make some significant change. But now you're a year behind. Because really what I am suggesting is going to probably next year take the Nuggets further away from winning a title. But it's a necessary step back for them to then take 2 steps forward. But standing still, they're inevitably taking a step back. And then once that realization washes over them, now they're a year behind. And perhaps the core has even less value than it does right now. And then what are they going to do? 719-247-1313. Somebody who did do a great deal this year to try and remake his team on the fly was Chris McFarland. So why isn't he being rewarded for it? What's going on with these postseason awards in the NHL? First, Nathan MacKinnon gets snubbed from being a Hart Trophy finalist. Jared Bednar, of course, wasn't going to be a Jack Adams finalist because for some reason he never is. But for the most puzzling one might actually be the finalists that were announced today. Chris McFarland is not a finalist for General Manager of the Year in the NHL. It's Jim Nill of Dallas, Bill Zito of Florida, and the Jets GM. Those are the finalists. Chris McFarland completely swaps out his goalie room, adds 3 new centermen, and his team finishes with over 100 points, and he can't even get an invite to the award show? Dallas makes the big move for Rantanen. Like the most significant addition any team has made this season. You want to include Jim Nill? Okay. But just know that that's about the only thing he did all year. Dallas's big acquisition this offseason was Matt Dumba. I don't even think Matt Dumba is playing in the Western Conference Final. But fine. You added Mikko Rantanen. It's a big swing. Respect. You get picked. Bill Zito, I have no problem with. None whatsoever. You get Brad Marchand, you get Seth Jones. How about the Seth Jones redemption arc that is transpired in Florida? 2 very big in-season moves. Didn't do much this offseason, but why should he? His team just won the Stanley Cup. So I have no problem with him being entertained. Once again, I find myself with Winnipeg in my crosshairs because when the Hart Trophy candidates came out, the one that I wanted excluded so Nathan MacKinnon could be included was Connor Hellebuck. And now I'm doing the same thing. Please, somebody tell me, who was it that Winnipeg acquired this season? Just anybody. Any name, any new player on the Winnipeg Jets this year? Anybody? I have it in front of me. This is the entire list of acquisitions Winnipeg made. They signed Anthony Duclair, who I think they ended up getting rid of. Laurent Brossoit, who we never see because he's the backup to Connor Hellebuck. And they acquired Brandon Tanev during the season. That's it. Chris McFarland added Charlie Coyle, Eric Johnson, Scott Wedgwood, Mackenzie Blackwood, Brock Nelson, Jack Drury, Marty Necas. Made huge trades to completely remake this Avalanche team, and he did it in the middle of the season. And the job that the Jets GM did was better than him, was more notable than him. I mean, we could talk about what happened to the Avalanche in the postseason all we want. It's a regular season award. This is ridiculous to me. It seems like the voters are falling over themselves to give Winnipeg everything. Like we got to make Connor Hellebuck was so good, he's up for the MVP. And we got to give their coach up for coach of the year, and we got to make their GM of the year, and we got to find, a rookie, any rookie that they play. Like it just feels like they have to give Winnipeg all of this stuff because of the season they had, which wasn't actually that historic in the end. It was a historic start. Wasn't historic. Are they did they finish with the same amount of points as that Red Wings team did? And again, this is the one where I'm like, he did nothing. They ran it back, and Connor Hellebuck was better than he was the year before. That's what it was. The Colorado Avalanche completely remade their team. And their best player gets no credit for keeping the ship afloat, Nathan MacKinnon. Their coach gets no credit for integrating all of these new players on the fly. And the guy that made all these moves does not get recognized. We have never seen. The only thing I could think of is like the Rangers back in the 90s had a season where they made a flurry of moves. I don't think it compares to this. I don't think we've seen an in-season retool or a remaking of a team in the NHL, and Chris MacFarland can't even be a finalist. If he loses to Bill Zito because Zito took a Stanley Cup winning team, fortified it with Brad Marchand and Seth Jones, cool. If you want to give it to Jim Nill because he got the big prize of the season and Mikko Rantanen, fine. But Chris MacFarland's not even a finalist? And I don't even know that I agree with the idea that Chris MacFarland wouldn't win it. He completely remade the team, and they still finished with over 100 points. Forget what happened in the postseason because it doesn't matter. It doesn't apply. Nobody. So essentially, the Avalanche season, the only credit that they're going to get is Cale Makar winning the Norris Trophy, which he can basically win every year from now until the end of his career. Like the most obvious thing that has nothing to do with what happened this year. Cale Makar was the Norris Trophy winner, could have been the Norris Trophy winner last year, or the year before, or the year before, or the year before. I think somebody else deserves some recognition. The players did it. I'll give credit to the players, not the writers, the players, because the players put both Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar up for the Ted Lindsay. Usually I'm on the other side. Usually I say that the players don't know what they're talking about because it's players who voted Tyrese Halliburton the most overrated player in the NBA. They're the ones that carry out vendettas and become prisoner of the moment when they all said Jalen Hurts after his rookie year was one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. And now I'm on the player's side. I'm saying at least they're acknowledging that what has happened with the Avalanche is quite remarkable and somebody deserves some credit for it. And the craziest thing about all of this is that I don't know that I even I didn't like the move to trade Mikko Rantanen. And I've been as critical as Chris MacFarland since then as anybody. But the guy still deserves some credit for being able to pull off all these moves. You think it's hard to pull off a trade in your fantasy league. Try to pull off a trade in the NBA or the NHL. It's like impossible. Everyone's trying to win the trade. And he pulled off multiple trades. And by the way, multiple trades of significance. Where would this Avalanche team have been if he had not made the moves with the goalies? Did they forget what Alexander Georgiev looked like at the beginning of the season? They increased their winning percentage by 15% after making the move for Mackenzie Blackwood. Mackenzie Blackwood played at a Vezina Trophy level the minute he got to Colorado. The guy who brought him in doesn't get any credit, but Winnipeg, their GM who sat on his hands and hoped that Connor Hellebuck was better this season, that guy gets to be invited? That's insane to me. I mean, but the bigger thing here is, man, ever since the end of the regular season, this has been like hell on earth for the Avalanche. You lose the series to Dallas. Dallas now looks like they might win it all, and Mikko Rantanen might win the Conn Smythe. You get snubbed for the Hart Trophy. You get snubbed for this award. Now Brock Nelson probably won't sign with you. Like, could you? It has been a nightmare since the regular season ended for the Colorado Avalanche. But again, this is a regular season award, and it looked pretty good at the end of the regular season. Nope. Sorry. I have a graphic. If you're watching, I have a paper. It's neatly printed up with all the moves. You notice that down here, this far column, that's all the players and picks the Avs have moved compared to Florida, Winnipeg, and Dallas. You see how much longer the list is? Isn't that the GM's job? And Chris McFarland absolutely worked. Can't even be named a finalist over Kevin Cheveldayoff, who brought in one defenseman and the backup to the goalie that plays every single game. Great work in Winnipeg. And I know it's a regular season award, but how's Winnipeg doing right now? Where are they at? Again, doesn't disqualify them from these awards, but it's just like, it's like when the NBA MVP voters voted Embiid, and then Embiid does what he always does and flames out in the playoffs, and they kind of look foolish. Winnipeg's going to get all these awards after another flame out in the playoffs. Avs lost to that team too. I get it. Edmonton's probably going to lose to that team too. I get it. Chris McFarland deserves something. Something. A ribbon. A gift certificate. Give the guy something. He did more work than I have seen some GMs do in 10 years on the job in one season. Speaking of Dallas and Edmonton, Game 2 tonight, 6 o'clock. Special teams. Special teams. Dallas 3 of 4 on the power play in Game 1, which exacerbates the biggest issue Edmonton has. They're playing the guy that they tried to run out. They didn't want Stuart Skinner to be their goalie. And now they have to deal with them, and they say on the penalty kill, your best penalty killer is your goalie. Well, that's not been the strength of the Edmonton Oilers, has it? Goaltending. So, to me, it's quite simple. If Edmonton is going to even this series, they got to stay out of the penalty box, or they got to do better than 1 of 3 on the power play. They either got to match Dallas power play for power play, or they got to quit committing penalties, because they're putting their goaltender in a penalty kill situation is just not going to work. Not going to do it. But I will say this, at least Edmonton's not Carolina. Holy smokes, Carolina. Anytime you'd like to show up for the Eastern Conference Final, feel free. 7 shots through 2 periods. 7. The NHL got these playoffs completely out of whack. Because I saw somebody point this out, and I focused on the Western Conference end of this, where Colorado and Dallas meeting in the first round. You know, if Gary Bettman had his playoff seeded correctly and not this stupid, phony manufacturing of rivalries that he likes to do in the first round, we would have seen Florida, Carolina round 1 and gotten away from it. Florida could have finished off Carolina in 4 games again, and we could have moved on with our lives collectively. That would have been the 4-5. Florida, Carolina, and we're getting that in the Eastern Conference Final, and it has been an absolute joke of a series through 2 games. Seven 719-24-7-13-13. Speaking of jokes, tell me if you have heard this one before. The Rockies, why they are getting ready to get absolutely pummeled this weekend in front of a packed house for 3 days at Coors Field. The timing of this Yankee visit to Coors Field could not come at a worse time for the Colorado Rockies, because the Rockies, after their loss yesterday to Philadelphia, have now had the worst start through 50 games in 130 years. 130 years. Now, the Cleveland Spiders are the gold standard for putridness. But we're talking about 50 games. So we're talking about the Louisville Colonels of 1895 that started their season 7-43. So it was the 1895 Louisville Colonels. Fast forward 130 years, the Colorado Rockies. And now they are welcoming in the team that has hit the second most home runs in the league. And they themselves are the pitching staff that has given up the most home runs in the league. And the setting is the most home run friendly park in all of baseball. Surely this will go well for the Colorado Rockies this weekend. They have someone named Tanner Gordon starting tonight. Never heard of the guy. Just called him up from Albuquerque. He's pitching tonight against the only saving grace for the Colorado Rockies is that Giancarlo Stanton's not playing. Remember the home run he hit as a member of the Marlins off of Chad Bettis? It was back in 2016. Traveled over 500 feet. Thankful, and he's hit a few that have traveled very far. That's the only good thing. And you essentially, I don't know how much better it is, because now you're essentially swapping Stanton out for Cody Bellinger, who absolutely rakes at Coors Field. And he's hitting at a 500 clip over the last couple of weeks. So I don't think it actually is better. Bellinger's not going to hit 500-foot home runs, but he could hit 3 in a game. Aaron Judge, last time he visited Coors Field, hit 2 home runs in 3 games. This is going to go poorly. At a time that, and why I say it's the worst timing, this is the stage of the calendar year where we have implored the Colorado Rockies to get us to Broncos season. Right? Avs, Nuggets are done. Broncos have not yet hit training camp. Get us filling this gap. And what is filling that gap is the worst season any human being alive on the face of the earth has ever seen. And that's not hyperbolic. Those are facts. This is the worst baseball season that any human being alive on planet Earth has ever seen. The Rockies aren't this cheeky inside joke that you and I talk about. PTI did another segment on the Rockies. They had the Rockies again in the rundown, second time in as many days. They are the biggest joke in sport. They used to be just our biggest joke in Colorado sports. Now they're everyone's joke. Everyone's in on the joke now. And now you have a high-profile series during Memorial Day weekend where you're facing a team that is often referred to as the Bombers. And no one has given up more bombs than you. And the stands are going to be packed. They're going to have a sellout every single night of this series. to watch the Yankees absolutely pummel the hapless Colorado Rockies. But hey, at least the people tonight will see Bo Nix throw out the first pitch. I don't know, depending on how it goes, if he gets it over the plate, perhaps, I don't even know who the man, Warren Schaefer, I think is his name. Bill Schmidt's got to sign up Bo Nix. If he gets a pitch over the plate tonight, throw him in the rotation. He'd be better than Tanner Gordon. Heck, he'd be better than Freeland and Senzatella, who are pitching the other two games, who are right now both on pace to join the vaunted 1-2 punch of Jim Hughley and Charlie Nepper of the Cleveland Spiders, who remain one of the only duos in a pitching staff to both lose 20 games in a season. And they're both on pace to do that. And they might not be alone. Rockies could get 3 20-game losers by the end of this season. How can I make this worse? Because I feel like I said all that stuff, but it's not quite landing just how bad things have gotten. Allow me to throw in a couple of things. Yesterday, Coors Field security denied a Phillies player getting on the field. There was a Phillies player that went to the stands. This was in the morning when they were working out, when the public's not allowed in. The gates are closed. How many more people could possibly be there than staff and players? They wouldn't allow a Phillies player back out on the field. Zach Wheeler had to go to security and vouch for the guy. That's a little embarrassing. And so is this, a new lawsuit where the Rockies are being sued by a fan who got hit by a foul ball. Or it might have been fair. I don't know. It was a foul ball. 2 seasons ago. 2 seasons. It wasn't even this season. The suit, and this is real, the suit claims the Rockies' poor play was a factor. Quote, defendants' longstanding poor performance on the field has contributed to a game day environment in which spectators, particularly those in luxury suites, are less engaged with the action on the field. That is the case being made in an actual lawsuit. That the Rockies are so bad, this dude wasn't paying attention and got hit by a foul ball. And you know what? I hope he wins the case. I don't know what legal grounds he has. I hope he wins. I like this line from the lawsuit. This cultural shift is not incidental, but rather encouraged by the Rockies' own marketing and design choices, which emphasize hospitality and off-field amenities over fan vigilance. Party deck. Right? This is the party deck clause in the lawsuit. Oh, I hope this dude wins. I'm pulling for him. What's his name? His last name is Roquel. I hope he wins. This is going to go so bad. But you know what? And I'll take the question. I'm stealing this straight from PTI because they did this today. I am now with the Nuggets and the Avalanche in the rearview mirror. The Broncos still a ways away. I am all in on this. I am all in over the next 3 days in watching the Colorado Rockies get bludgeoned. And if they don't, I will be disappointed. This is what we have. The news cycle is going to be dominated by a race to the bottom that we have never seen in our lives. I'm all for it. I want the Rockies to keep losing. That's an easy question. PTI is asking it. PTI asked it earlier today. Do you want the Rockies to win or to lose. I don't know what Kornheiser and Wilbon said. I say lose. I say keep losing. If you're going to be this garbage, you might as well make some history while you're at it. And you might as well embarrass yourselves while you're at it, which the Rockies have done a fantastic job of over 50 games. Lawsuits. I hope they lose everything. And maybe they'll just lose their franchise. Maybe we're not rooting for the right thing. Maybe it's not wanting Dick Monfort to sell. Maybe we just want Major League Baseball to pull the franchise. Contraction. Shouldn't that be what we're rooting for here? Contraction, no more baseball? I'm getting there. Rockies, Yankees, first of 3 tonight. Come on, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, do what you always do, especially Cody Bellinger. My God, you've been killing the Rockies for years. Don't stop now. 719-24-7-1313. The 3 biggest stories of the day coming up next. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time Sports on this Friday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Coming up in less than 20 minutes, I'll be joined by Jeff Heidmas, who is one of the newest inductees into the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame. Looking forward to chatting with him about his storied career as a part of the water polo program there at the Air Force Academy. Your thoughts, welcome as well, 719-247-1313. You could call or text it in, and you can always find me on X at Gingerly Tweets. Now, perhaps you'd like to weigh in on any of these, the three stories that are driving the show. All right, let's start with a bit of a mea culpa from the former head coach of the Denver Nuggets.
Nikola won the first of his 3 MVPs, and I did vote for him again this year. If I had a vote, want to make sure the people in Denver know that because right now I'm getting a lot of heat back home.
That was Michael Malone last night on ESPN, setting the record straight after his comments on SportsCenter a couple of nights ago hit the collective ears of Nuggets Nation wrong when he said the second half performance by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in Game 1 was, quote, why he's the MVP. So perhaps Michael Malone just left out a bit, a word or two that would have qualified his comments, but last night made up for it. Also went on to call Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a foul artist, which is a nice way to call him a foul baiter. So all is forgiven. Even though some part of me says I kind of wish that Michael Malone was being petty. It'd be more fun if he's like, you know what, you fired me. I'm gonna go and play revisionist history with the entire Nikola Jokic era. But he didn't. It'd be difficult, I will admit, and he'd immediately lose credibility as an analyst, but what stake do I have in how well this goes for Michael Malone on the television side? Be petty. But he wasn't being petty. Just did not quite say what he wanted to say. He still thinks Nikola Jokic should have been the MVP. And he's right. Now, last night, the foul artist known as SGA and the Oklahoma City Thunder, the subject of our second story, once again proved to be far too much for the Minnesota Timberwolves as they take Game 2, and the series, in many ways, is pretty much over. 92.6% of the time that a team takes a 2-0 series lead in a 7-game series, they go on to win the series. And I think that percentage will go up ever so slightly because I don't see a path back for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They were already at a disadvantage in terms of overall talent. They didn't have home court. And the biggest thing I saw last night, well, two things. One, Anthony Edwards played great. 32 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. They still weren't even close to beating OKC. And the Jaden McDaniels push of Shai down to the floor tells me the fouls that are getting called, the officiating is in the Wolves' head. And Aaron Gordon said it after Game 7 of their series with OKC. He spent too much time worrying about that, and he regretted it. Minnesota's going down the same path. OKC's better than them on the court, and they're in their heads. It's a matter of when, not if, Oklahoma City goes on to play in the NBA Finals. But what people are making the mistake of that I don't think they should is saying that because the Denver Nuggets were a better match for Oklahoma City than Minnesota has been, then that makes the Nuggets Thunder series the real Western Conference final. Nope. Let's not forget what recent matchups between the Wolves and the Nuggets have been. It would be a great series, just like OKC Denver was, but Minnesota still has Naz Reid, still has Jaden McDaniels, still has Rudy, still has Anthony Edwards. A lot of the guys that give the Nuggets problems are still there. The Nuggets wouldn't have an easier time making threes than they did in the OKC series. They wouldn't have an easier time stopping the best player on the other team. Anthony Edwards would be able to put up Shea-like numbers against the Denver Nuggets defense. And some of the things that Nikola Jokic struggled with in that OKC series, he would struggle with in the Minnesota series. Can't lose sight of it. It's about matchups. Minnesota, bad matchup for the Nuggets. OKC, not as bad of a matchup for the Nuggets, but still not a great matchup. OKC, worst matchup for Minnesota. It's about matchups. It's about what you do and how that attacks the weakness of your opponent. Certainly the Thunder Nugget series was more entertaining, but it is not in some way the real Western Conference final. We have the real Western Conference final. This is just how much better OKC is than everybody else. That's what you're seeing right now. And if you think in that vein that the Nuggets really lost in the real Western Conference final in 7 games, that's exactly the type of thought process Josh Kroenke probably has, which I believe is harmful and counterproductive for the Denver Nuggets and where they need to go forward. What we are seeing right now in the playoffs is that another team has jumped the Denver Nuggets. 2 years ago, the Nuggets were the best team in the West. Beat LA, beat Minnesota, beat Phoenix. The next year, Minnesota jumped them. This year, Minnesota still above them, and OKC jumped them. The idea that the Nuggets are essentially plateauing or standing still and not falling back, that's not right. In the last 2 years, 2 teams have supplanted them. They have moved from 1 to 2 to 3. Now, next year, if the Nuggets stand pat, Houston probably will jump them. If San Antonio lands Giannis, San Antonio could quickly jump over the Denver Nuggets. That's what I find to be so dangerous about what I heard from Josh Kroenke yesterday, is that I don't know that he believes the way I do that the Nuggets need to make a move of great significance. They must do something with their core 4 players. Or else there's going to be another team next year and another team after that are going to jump the Denver Nuggets, and they're going to be further behind. What I am suggesting may put the Nuggets back a year. Next year might be a kind of a transitional year, getting to know their new teammates and working it all together in David Adelman's first full season. But then they'll be ready to take a step forward after that. The path that I think Josh Kroenke is trying to lead the Nuggets down is they're going to stand pat. There's going to be at least one other team in the West that we're going to look at by the end of next year and say the Nuggets aren't better than them, and they're not better than OKC, and they're not better than Minnesota. And maybe that shocks Josh Kroenke into, or the next GM of the Nuggets into doing something, but then they're just a year behind. thinking that the Denver Nuggets essentially lost in 7 games in the real Western Conference Final is not helpful. No, they lost in the second round to a better team that went on to play a team that is also better than the Denver Nuggets. Or putting it this way, the Nuggets cannot beat in a 7-game series. They lost to a team that is now playing a team that the Nuggets couldn't beat in a 7-game series either. They can't look at themselves as legitimate championship contenders if Gordon, Porter, Murray, and Jokic are together again next season. That's just a bottom line fact of the matter. They must do something with this core. But I don't think they're going to. And they can watch out for Houston or watch out for San Antonio, because they're coming up from behind and they're going to pass them sometime between now and this time next year. Story number 3. The GM of the Year finalists have been announced for the NHL, yet no Chris McFarland. A guy that changed over a significant portion of the roster, the entire spine of this team, right? Got 3 new centermen, 2 new goalies, traded one of their best players, did all this. The Avalanche still found a way to get over 100 points on the season, and he can't even get invited to the NHL awards ceremony. He didn't do a better job than Kevin Cheveldayoff of Winnipeg, who brought in Connor Hellebuck's backup that we never saw, and Chris Tanev, or Brandon Tanev. He brought in a Tanev, not both, because both would have been, well, maybe we got to consider Kevin Cheveldayoff a little bit more. I have no problem with Jim Nill, who made the most significant acquisition of any team this season by landing Mikko Rantanen. I don't have a problem with him being a finalist. I don't have a problem with Bill Zito, the GM of the Florida Panthers, looking at a Stanley Cup winning team and saying this isn't good enough and going out and getting Brad Marchand and Seth Jones. But Winnipeg did nothing. And yet all of these voters seem to be throwing every award at them that they can. It's like, no, the Vezina Trophy is enough. That's why they were as good as they were. Connor Hellebuck. And I don't even think it was good enough to be included as one of the Hart Trophy finalists. But he deserves the Vezina. That's good enough. Why do we have to throw everything? The coach, the goalie's so good he's an MVP candidate. The GM. Winnipeg didn't do anything. Chris McFarland undertook the most drastic roster reshaping in recent memory in the NHL, and he didn't do one of the 3 best jobs of any GM in the league. That's nonsense. Say what you will about how it ultimately ended. This is a regular season award, and no one did their job more than Chris McFarland. Doesn't make any sense. So they undergo this drastic roster reshape, and their best player, who kept the ship afloat, not one of the 3 MVP finalists, their coach, who had to integrate all of these new parts and still win games and still strive to win a division, he doesn't get nominated or become a finalist for the coach of the year. And the guy that pulled the trigger on all of these deals, which were complicated and not easy to make, he doesn't get acknowledged. So I'm just curious, who are we supposed to give credit to? Oh, Cale Makar being the best defenseman, as if that's different than any other season. Makes 0 sense to me why Bednar, McKinnon, and McFarland, none of them are getting recognized for the work they did this season. It is absolutely nuts to me. But Winnipeg, yep. Let's give everything to Winnipeg. Oh, just saw this. Hit my inbox. Nikola Jokic named NBA all NBA first team. Not surprising. But that just hit my inbox. So that's another one for Nikola Jokic. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Jeff Heidmis, one of the members of the 2025 class of the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame, will be my guest. It's been a fun week on the show, having the chance to visit with members of this year's Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame. And we're closing out the week strong with another member of that class. Nearly every accomplishment that the Air Force Academy's men's water polo team has had, this man has had his fingerprints on, whether it be as a coach or as a player. He ranks third all-time in scoring as a player, first all-time in wins as a coach with 328. Jeff Heidmas is my guest. Jeff, congratulations, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ryan, and thanks for all you do to support Air Force sports.
It is always my pleasure to do so. And there are so many things that make you worthy of inclusion in this Hall of Fame. But one of the things that sticks out to me, Jeff, is your longevity. And not just longevity in the sport, but your longevity at the academy. I mean, you've spent decades in one capacity or another at that school. I got to imagine you're not sticking around if you don't love it. What do you love most about the academy, and why, regardless of whether it's being a cadet, a coach, an administrator, why you keep wanting to go back day after day and be a part of the academy?
Well, I that's a loaded question. I think, do you believe in divine providence? It was a miracle that I even became a cadet. And if I wasn't a cadet, none of this happens. It was one of those things where, I guess to back up, in 1973, we were the last high school class to ever have a draft. I had a 2-digit draft number. And I only got an appointment to the academy because all the people they really wanted gave appointments to. Too many of them turned them down. So I didn't find out till May that I was even being offered an appointment. So I had an older brother who was already there, and he was in his freshman year, and it became one of those sibling rivalry things. Like, well, hell, if Walt could do it, I can do it. So it's like, okay, I'll go. I went sight unseen. I'd never seen the academy before. There wasn't a coach at the academy who even called me to recruit me. I just kind of showed up, and then 5 decades later, I made a life of it. And did I love it? As a cadet, I think the thing I loved the most and learned the most at the academy was through my athletic experience. I think I learned more officership and leadership down at the pool than I did anywhere else. And I think that's the beauty of having multiple things that happen at the academy, because you talk about love, and I think, love leads to desire, and the more profound your desire is, the more you'll pursue excellence. And, whether it's loving your job, they say if you love your work, you'd never work a day in your life, So it was kind of that way. Not that it was easy, but I think the academy, there are kids who love cybersecurity, and they win hacking competitions against Air Force paid people, and cadets work for food and lodging, and they're winning national competitions, and they have an excellence in their field. And, our airmanship guys, they're down there doing excellent stuff too. And everybody has a path. And I think the academy sometimes makes a big mistake when they try to cookie cutter everybody into too many, mandatory same programs that everybody kind of muddles through, just to graduate, as opposed to, can we inspire people to actually pursue excellence? And that's the part that helped me the most in my career, and that I thought the educational value of athletics was critical to providing that experience and that development for other cadets. So through coaching, and as well as trying to make some institutional changes during my time there were all very satisfying opportunities for me.
You said that you going to the academy was a little bit of a chance happening. I'm curious, at any point during while you were a cadet, while you were playing at the academy, were you like, I think I might be a good coach? Like, was coaching something that you had in the back of your mind as you progressed through your education there at the academy?
I don't recall having, that strong draw that way. I enjoyed it when I would have your 3-week summer break. My younger brother, Phil, ended up being a cadet as well. So Walt was 1 year ahead of me and Phil was 3 years behind. So when I'd have my 3-week break, usually I'd go home and see Phil. And I would end up coaching his high school team in their summer league when I was there. And I enjoyed it. And but didn't really think of it. You have this service commitment,
Yeah.
You think you're going to do 20 years in the Air Force. My dad had flown 76 combat missions between World War II and Korea. So it was kind of in the family, and then Walt was there and I came and then Phil came. So it became like a family legacy as part of that, hide miss pool thing. But, I stayed engaged. I first went to tech school down in Keesler, Mississippi, and in my spare time, I found this swim club and said, "Hey, you guys want to learn how to play water polo?" And I found another swim club in Gulfport, and I built some water polo goals out of a cage and pulled a ball out of the back of my car, and we held the first water polo game ever in the state of Mississippi. So fun stuff like that. And then my first assignment was in Sacramento, and I coached high school for a couple of years. And the team I had, they were really in need of a coach. Matter of fact, I had to make it a co-ed team just to have enough to compete. We did pretty well. We made it to the playoffs for the region, but I never really did until the academy called me. I didn't pursue them. They actually called me, and it was, again, back to that divine providence thing. I was doing my job as a communications officer, and back then, during your career, you had to do a remote tour before you could be eligible for promotion to major. And I was still a single guy, so I was like, I'm going to do this now. So I was the only volunteer to run this 40-person communications site on a mountaintop near Camp New Amsterdam, Netherlands. And I thought I had it. And then they turned me down. They gave it to a non-volunteer. And I was like, it's 1980 and Ma Bell had just been deconsolidated. So the world of communication was getting ready to explode with all the different communication companies. And do I stay in? Do I get out? And the academy called and said, "Hey, do you want to coach?" And I said, "Sure." And so Colonel Ed Clyett hired me. 25-year-old first lieutenant, youngest head coach in academy history, and I think I'll own that little factoid forever now that we've gone to civilian head coaches. But so it's amazing how one thing just kind of leads to another, and I get there in March of '81, and my brother Phil, he graduated. I was just out there in June of '80 when he graduated. Less than a year later, I'm back as the coach, which, makes it somewhat complicated because I'm now coaching the juniors and seniors who played with my younger brother. So it was an interesting dynamic. We had a lot of success, but there's a lot of things that contributed to that. So, yeah.
And you mentioned there, you get the gig just a few years after graduation, and I talked to Dan Oosterhouse earlier in this week. He came back to the academy after a long time. Troy Calhoun with the football team, same way, and you turned essentially right around and became the head coach. And you talk about that interesting dynamic. I'm curious, Jeff, when was it where you went, I think I got the hang of this?
You know, it didn't take too long. It was, I guess I'll back up a little bit. You know, it was kind of a learning experience for all of us. You know, I'm trying to get my feet on the ground as a coach. I think the fact that I was a little undersized as a college player, you know, I had to be, you know, the fittest guy in the pool. I had to be technically sound and had to have good situational awareness. And I think all that kind of helped me transition into coaching, because I had the, you know, what needed to be developed in the players. And so I always felt the academy could be better than they were. Like I had 2 different head coaches when I was there. My brother had 3 different coaches, Phil. Just the dynamic of back then outside of, say, football and basketball and hockey, they had all military head coaches. And so you had this, hey, that's your assignment for 4 years. And there was only a handful of people that were allowed to stick around, and there were different avenues to do that. And so I always felt like, okay, I got 4 years, at least for this group of guys, you know, this group of freshmen, I'm going to be their one coach, and then we'll just go from there. And so I was really blessed with an unbelievable first team captain, a guy named Keith Lindbergh, who actually just retired from being the senior partner at Penrad here in town. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's
So,
it's a smaller world sometimes than we think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it ended up being kind of, you know, big brother showing a lot of tough love to his younger brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I couldn't really go in there and say, you know, I got 10 years of coaching experience. Listen to me. You know, they all knew the situation too, you know. And so that dynamic of being similar in age, you have to keep a little distance, but you can't pretend that the situation is different than it is. So I was pretty hard on him in practice, and it was kind of a shock to the level of work. But Keith was just wanted to win, and he got the whole locker room behind what we wanted to do. And we had a lot of success that first year. I mean, we beat the first top 10 water polo school in academy history and went on to qualify for the NCAA tournament my first year. And that was a blessing. And maybe it was a little bit of a curse, because sometimes when you have that much success early, you think you got it all figured out. And it's amazing how now that I'm older, you know, it's kind of, not to get too philosophical here, but you turn 70 and it's amazing how you look back in life and you look at and you think of all the things you could have done better, you know, and wish I could have had with that first team what I knew, what, you know, from how to coach a team, what I had with my last team. But, you know, we had success and we made it work, and actually getting that first top 10 win, I didn't realize at the time. I was just so happy to be a part of it that really kind of kick-started the whole Air Force water polo kind of arriving on the national scene. And as the years played out, it became more obvious, but it was pretty special.
Jeff Heidman's my guest. He is one of the newest inductees into the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame, and you did pretty well for yourself the first time around. 4 NCAA tournament appearances in the 80s and the 90s. Some coaches would say, we'll call that a career. Good enough. Not you. You went back. They pulled you back in. What was that divine providence? How did that all play out that you would retake the reins of the water polo program?
Yeah, if you don't mind me backing up and giving a little background on that, we had a lot of success in my first 17 years of coaching. I had a 1-year break because part of that military coach thing I talked about is back then, if some organization sponsored you for your graduate degree, then they had to take you back. Okay. So at the end of my first 4 years, we had some success. They offered me an opportunity to go get a master's degree. And I went and got it in exercise physiology. And that was a good stepping stone for my career because I went to this small institute on the UC Santa Barbara campus. They only took like 5 graduate students a year, and they're run by this guy who's written 43 books. So there was a lot of pressure. But the beautiful part of that is Santa Barbara was 50 miles from where I grew up, Cabrillo High School. And the Air Force was happy because they got to pay in-state tuition. And I was happy because my family was married now. Funny thing, Barb, who I married, got to the academy 1 month after I did as an athletic trainer. And we've been together. She's been with me all 5 decades of this progression. It's still a family affair. But UC Santa Barbara had won a national championship in 1979. And their head coach was the older brother of a guy I played with at the academy, Frank Snyder. And so I got a hold of Pete and said, hey, I'm doing this master's program. And I can't be there all the time. I don't want to be involved in planning or anything, but I can show up and maybe coach your centers and your goalies and, I don't want to travel. I'll just be there for home games. I got to take care of this graduate program. And he was all for it. And, being a young guy out in Colorado and the sport being primarily California. I mean, back then, like lacrosse was everything on the East Coast. There was nothing out here. And California was where it's at. Like even today, there hasn't been a single Olympian who didn't go to a California school. So you always wonder, what are they doing out there that's so special? So this was a beautiful opportunity for me to kind of hang out with a team and a coach who had won a national championship. And the end of that year, it actually helped me with a lot of confidence and kind of validated things that I was doing. You always pick up things from people, but it was kind of gave me, that, I guess I already said confidence, but to continue what I've been doing. And so when I got back in the 80s and 90s, that was kind of the best of times. I mean, we went 9 straight years in the conference championship game. We were in the conference championship game 10 on my left, 11 years before I retired. And I retired because I had to retire from the military. And so I'll get to that in a minute, but during that period of time, we had, as a team, upset 26 top 10 teams, which,
wow,
to put that in perspective, all the other non-California schools combined during those 17 years didn't have 26 wins. So, that kind of led all those guys who, accomplished those great things, and I was able to coach pretty cool kids. They kind of led to my induction into U.S. Water Polo Hall of Fame at that point. And I thought my career was over. So then I went on to, when I retired, talk about divine providence. Congress at that time said, hey, 25% of your faculty has to be civilianized. You can't have all military people anymore. And Colonel Spetman, who was the AD at the time, General Waggy, the dean, kind of went to Randy and said, man, I'm having to convert way too fast. You have some positions down there you want to convert? And he wanted to keep me as the head of PE, which was, I was the last military head coach by that time, and the only one doing more than just coaching. And so he went and got one, and I said, Randy, I said, but to be fair to my athletes, I'm not doing both anymore. I'm not a military guy. I'm not running this department and coaching my team. Nobody else is doing that. And I always felt that even though we had been in the championship game, 9 straight years, which I think is still a conference record, we only won it twice. And I always felt that if there was somebody who could just totally focus on the team instead of being pulled as an administrator and a coach, that the program could really take off. And so I told Randy, pick one. What do you want me to do? And he said, well, I think we can find somebody who knows water polo easier than we can find somebody who knows the academy. And I need you to help me with some of that institutional stuff at the academy. It was a good time for me. My kids were in high school, and coach's life is pretty tough with the long hours and the evenings and gone on weekends and that kind of stuff. So it was a good fit for me at that time. And I thought, like you said, my coaching career was over, and I was just doing my thing. And then in 2010, so we hired a guy, and for whatever reason, he wasn't as successful as we had been. And they gave him 11 years to kind of see where he would go. And I was just sitting in my office, and we were in the middle of I was given a project to renovate the cadet gym, which was very fun for me. I was just sitting at my desk doing some design work on how to make this a true co-ed facility, And George Nelson, who was the sports supervisor for water polo, strolls in and goes, hey, the players are asking for a coaching change. And I said, well, George, it's May. How are you going to hire somebody? Practice starts in 2 months. I thought he was going to come in and ask me for who might be a good replacement. He looked at me and goes, well, it is too late to do a national coach. That's why I'm here. I want to know if you'll coach next year. And I'm like, well, let me think about that, George. But it's only going to happen after I have a chance to talk to all the seniors on the team. And so get the seniors in. Of course, these are the guys who are asking for a change, right? And I said, let me tell you, there's 9 of them. And I said, I think you'd be lucky if 4 of you guys are on the team by the start of by the first game if I'm your coach. And so you need to tell me, do you really want some new guy walking in who you don't know? And if you keep the other coach, you got your spot. Yeah. And it's just really how you want your senior year to shake out, because I'm not going down there fighting you guys. And to their credit, they said, well, regardless of how it plays out for us, we think the program can be better than it is and needs a change. So that's how that happened. And I thought it was a 1-year gig. And actually, I was lucky in the part of that gym renovation we were doing. The natatorium it was part of the construction of that time. So we're tearing the entire pool down. So we couldn't teach physical education classes in there. And the guy who ran the aquatics program for me because I was running the P department at that time, was the only 3-time All-American in water polo history I recruited. He actually played on the U.S. under-19 national team in France and world-class athlete program. And we brought him back to teach physical education. And so he was available. And I said, well, George, if you'll let Brian Pendergast be my assistant, because now there's somebody who I know, right? I'm not dealing with somebody else's assistant. And you take some things off my plate, maybe we can make this happen for 1 year. And then during that year, I come up with a whole list of, hey, George, here's some up and coming assistant coaches from Cal and Stanford and UCLA, guys that I recruited when they were young kids, and now they're coaching. And here's a top 10 list of people to go encourage to come and take this program. And so the season ends, and we made progress, but on the scoreboard, not so much. But it's one of those things where, as a coach, you can see things were getting better. And then came to be about February, and I was like, hey, George, when are you going to advertise this position? And he said, well, I meant to talk to you about that.
Boxed in. He knew what he was doing, Jeff.
So he goes, the players, they want you back. And I said, well, that's real gratifying, but that wasn't the deal. So I need to go talk to Barb because, as we mentioned before, being, coach's life impacts the whole family. And, but all our kids were in college by then, and she was supportive. And it was, like, okay, I'd done a lot of things with the academy and sat on a lot of committees with the dean and the commandant. And to be honest, it's like the pendulum just keeps, it's like a circle pattern at the academy, the way things happen, because everybody comes there with the greatest of intentions and they're going to make it better, right? And so all the generals come in, the colonels come in, and every situation you're in has its pros and cons, but there's always a sweet spot where you get the most of the pros and the least of the cons. But whoever comes in hasn't seen you get to that point. They just walk in and go, oh, that's the problem. I'm going to fix that and help everybody out. So by fixing that, you shuffle the deck of the pros and cons, right? And then so that happens for 3 years, and the next guy comes in and he does it, and then the next guy comes in and he does it, and 12 years from now, you're right back where you started. And I had been through that cycle a couple of times, and I started to feel bad because I was like the old crusty in the room that with just all these young, excited guys wanting to make change. I go, hey, we tried that already. We did that once. That didn't work out so well. And so it was like, maybe, I only have a little bit more time, 5 to 8 more years before I'm going to call it quits. And maybe it'd be better for the academy to not have that old guy being a, black cloud on people's parade, and would kind of rejuvenate me to go do something new. And so Barb was okay with it. I went to George and said, here's what's going to happen. And we worked it out with the athletic director and everything, kind of a hybrid associate AD head coach thing, because they still wanted me to finish managing the construction of the gym and the designing and the building of the new fitness center that we had there. So I said, well, if you take these things away, I'll do that. I'll coach my team. And that's how I did it. And we ended up winning one more conference championship and going to the NCAAs one more time. So it was very gratifying.
Well, a remarkable career and a very well-deserved honor to be inducted into this year's Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame. Jeff Heidmis, this was an absolute pleasure, sir. Appreciate you taking time to join me, and maybe we'll catch up on September 26th when you get inducted.
That would be wonderful, and thank you so much for having me.
Yep, my pleasure, Jeff. Congratulations again. That's Jeff Heidmis. Has been involved in the academy for nearly 5 decades. And it all started with a chance, sight unseen, him going to the Air Force Academy. Remarkable. That was fun this week to be able to talk to all of these inductees. September 26th is when they will all be inducted into the Air Force Athletics Hall of Fame. GoAirForceFalcons.com is a great resource to find out more about these inductees and about the induction ceremony and all that good stuff. We'll take a break and come back, wrap up the show after this. Wrapping up the show for the week. It's been a busy week. All the Nuggets news in the wake of the loss in Game 7, where they go from here. All the Air Force Athletic Hall of Fame inductees joining me throughout the week. And, of course, our back and forth between you and I, which I enjoy the most. Really appreciate it. And have a meaningful Memorial Day weekend. We know the reason for Monday's holiday, and hopefully we all take some time to recognize why we have the day we have on Monday. I will be out at Territory Days on Monday from 1 to 7. You want to drop by and say hi, whatever you may be doing this holiday weekend. Be safe, and we'll reconvene on Monday and see what's what in the sports world. Appreciate you joining me. We'll talk soon.